The first day of university military training dawned with a brutality that felt personal. The late summer sun, a merciless orb of bleached gold, hammered down on the sprawling asphalt field, turning it into a griddle where we were the unwilling ingredients. By 10 a.m. the air shimmered with heat, and my mouth had taken on the texture of old felt. I'd committed the cardinal sin of a freshman. I'd forgotten my water bottle. A sharp, twisting cramp in my lower abdomen, a vicious herald of the period I knew was due tomorrow, made me gasp. I leaned heavily against my boyfriend of 3 years, Leo. Water, I managed to croak, my voice raspy. Please. I think I'm actually dying. Leo, looking infuriatingly pristine and comfortable in his uniform, grinned down at me. His resilience was one of the things I'd always loved about him. Hang on, Chloe. I've got you. He unscrewed the cap of his own expensive stainless steel bottle, a gift from me for his 18th birthday, and handed it to me. My fingers brushed against his as I took it, a familiar electric jolt of comfort and connection. I drank deeply, the cool, clean water a lifeline in the desert of my dehydration. It felt like an intimate act, sharing his water, a small testament to our shared history. As I handed the bottle back, our moment was shattered. Leo. Oh my God, I'm so thirsty I could die. Maya materialized beside us as she always did. Leo's cousin. She seemed immune to the universal dishevelment, her ponytail still sleek, her face merely glowed where the rest of us were dripping. She fanned herself dramatically. I'm such an idiot, I left my bottle in the dorm. You know how scatterbrained I get in the morning. She did. She cultivated this image of a helpless, whimsical creature, and Leo, her ever-devoted cousin, always fell for it. Before I could open my mouth to suggest the large industrial water cooler stationed a mere 50 yards away, Leo was handing her the bottle. My bottle. The one my lips had just touched. The one that represented a tiny, private oasis between us. Here, Maymay. Don't have a meltdown, he said, his tone fondly teasing. Maymay. The childhood nickname one I'd once found endearing, now felt like a deliberate exclusion, a reminder of a shared history I could never be part of. She took the bottle, her eyes, a clear, challenging blue, locking with mine over the rim as she took a long, theatrical swallow. It wasn't just about the water. It was a consumption of our intimacy, a territorial marking done with the casual cruelty of a cat. A hot wave of nausea, completely separate from the heat or my cramps, rolled through me. This was a pattern, a tapestry of 1,000 such tiny moments, each one a thread slowly unraveling the fabric of my relationship. Later, during a 15-minute break, we collapsed in a sliver of shade provided by the administration building. The cramps had intensified, coiling deep in my gut like serpents. I felt pale and clammy. Seeking solace, I leaned my head against Leo's shoulder, my hand pressed against my lower stomach. Leo, I whispered, my cramps are really bad. I don't know how I'm going to make it through the afternoon drills. Before Leo could respond, Maya was there, her voice dripping with a syrupy, false concern. Oh, you poor thing. You always get so fragile around this time of the month. She turned her wide, innocent gaze to Leo, effectively cutting me out of the conversation. Remember Leo? That time she had to leave my 16th birthday dinner early because the pain was so bad? She was just curled up in a ball in your car. It's so sad she has to suffer like that. Some girls just have really weak constitutions. The memory, which at the time had been a genuine moment of vulnerability where Leo had been wonderfully caring, was now being reframed. In her telling, I was no longer a person in pain. I was a fragile, inconvenient liability. I was weak. Leo's arm, which had been a comforting weight around my shoulders, seemed to loosen its hold. He looked from my pained face to Maya's sympathetic one. Yeah, Chloe, he said, his voice taking on a practical, slightly impatient tone. Maybe you should go tell the instructor you need to sit out for a bit. Don't push yourself too hard. The dismissal, though gently delivered, was a knife to the heart. My request for comfort had been twisted into a display of weakness, and he had accepted the new narrative without question. I wasn't his girlfriend needing support. I was a problem to be managed. I pushed myself upright, the pain in my abdomen a dull, throbbing counterpoint to the sharp ache in my chest, and walked away without a word, leaving them in their shared bubble of practicality. That night, back in the stark, unfamiliar confines of my dorm room, the silence was a heavy blanket. My roommate Lena was out and the emptiness gave me too much space to think. I replayed the day on a loop. The possessive glint in Maya's eye over the water bottle, the masterful way she'd recast my pain as a character flaw, Leo's easy capitulation. This wasn't a new dynamic. It was just the most stark, undeniable example of it. I thought back to the beginning. Leo and I had been together since we were 16. He was my first love, my first kiss, my first real heartbreak and subsequent makeup. Our families were next-door neighbors. Our mothers were best friends. Our relationship was the stuff of local legend, the perfect boy-next-door story. We'd planned our futures together, choosing this university as a joint mission. Maya had always been the haunting melody in the background of our love song. She was the orphaned cousin who had moved in with Leo's family when we were 14, after her parents were killed in a car crash. The tragedy was real and horrifying, and everyone, including me, had enveloped her in a protective cocoon of sympathy. "Be extra kind to Maya, Chloe," Leo's mom would often say, her eyes misty. "She's lost so much. She needs family now more than ever." And I had been kind. I'd included her in our group outings, shared my clothes with her, listened patiently to her stories of grief, and defended her when other kids found her intense attachment to Leo unsettling. But as we navigated our teenage years, that attachment morphed from childish dependence into something more possessive, more insidious. She became the perpetual third wheel on our dates, her name constantly popping up on his phone screen during our late-night calls, the person he had a separate, secret language of inside jokes with. I opened my laptop, the glow illuminating my tired face. There, sitting in my inbox, was the email I'd been avoiding for weeks. It was from my aunt, a formidable and successful woman who lived in Vancouver. The subject line was simple: OCAD University, Pathway Program. The Ontario College of Art and Design. My dream. My secret, burning passion was for graphic design, for creating worlds with color and line. But to please my parents, who valued stability and prestige, I had enrolled here in a safe, soulless business administration program. This email was a lifeline, an escape hatch to a life I actually wanted. My aunt was offering me a place to stay, her connections to fast-track my application, and a full-throated endorsement of my talent, which she'd seen in the portfolio I'd secretly built online. I had been hesitating, my cursor hovering over the reply button for days. The biggest obstacle was Leo. A long-distance relationship would be a monumental challenge. Could we survive it? Would the trust hold? But as I sat there in the quiet dorm, the ghost of Maya's smirk imprinted on my mind, I had a chilling moment of clarity. The relationship was already a long-distance one. I was right beside him, but emotionally he was in a different country, one whose borders were patrolled by his cousin. The distance wasn't geographical, it was spiritual. And it was growing every day. My phone buzzed, shattering the silence. It was a message in the group chat Leo had insisted we create with Maya, aptly named the Three Musketeers. "Leo, so we all survived day one? My feet are killing me." Grinning face with sweat. "Maya, barely. Thanks for saving my life with the water, cuz. You're my hero. Red heart, what would I do without you? Chloe, you feeling any better? Hope you're not too miserable all alone in your dorm." The message was a masterpiece. It reinforced their bond, positioned him as her savior, and isolated me in my misery, all under the guise of friendly concern. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, watching the little typing bubbles appear as they continued their conversation without me. The cracks I'd been papering over for years were now gaping wide, and I was tired of falling into them. A strange, cold calm settled over me. This wasn't a moment of hot-headed impulse. It was the culmination of a long, slow realization. I was an accessory in Leo's life, a trophy girlfriend to be displayed when convenient, but his primary emotional partnership was with Maya. I clicked reply on my aunt's email. My fingers flew over the keyboard, sure and steady for the first time in weeks. "Dear Aunt Sarah, thank you so much for your generous offer and your belief in me. I have given it a great deal of thought and I have decided that I would like to accept. My passion has always been for design, and I realize now that I need to have the courage to pursue it. Please, let's move forward. I am ready. With love, Chloe." I hit send, before the fear or the doubt or the memory of Leo's smile could change my mind. The action felt less like a leap of faith and more like a correction of course. It was the first decision I had made entirely for myself in a very long time. This was just the beginning. I knew with a certainty that chilled my bones, that Maya wouldn't let me go without a fight. She didn't want Leo for herself in a romantic sense. I was still unsure if she even understood her own feelings, but she craved the primacy, the control. My departure threatened that. And Leo, he would be confused, angry, lost. He would see my decision as a betrayal, not the self-preservation it was. But for the first time as I looked at the sent confirmation on my screen, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years. Agency. The game was changing because I was no longer willing to play by their rules. The foundation had cracks and I was finally ready to stop trying to hold it together and just let it fall. The days following my decision to study abroad were marked by a surreal, almost disorienting sense of peace. The constant low-grade anxiety that had been my companion for years. The need to check my phone to decode Maya's passive-aggressive comments, to manage Leo's moods, simply vanished. The silence it left behind was a balm for my frayed nerves. I was an actor who had walked off the stage and the play was continuing without me, its drama now a distant, muffled noise. My roommate, Lena, became an unexpected anchor. She was a sharp-witted philosophy major from Beijing with a zero-tolerance policy for what she called emotional nonsense. She'd witnessed the tail end of my quiet despair and had, without fanfare, appointed herself my guardian. "Look," she'd said one evening, handing me a cup of suspiciously strong tea. "A man who prioritizes his cousin's thirst over his girlfriend's is not a man. He is a walking red flag in human form. You are not losing a boyfriend, you are evicting a problematic tenant from your emotional real estate." I'd laughed, the sound strange and freeing in my ears. "It's more complicated than that, Lena. They've been close since her parents died. There's a lot of history." Lena had fixed me with a stare that could strip paint. "Trauma is not a blank check to be an asshole. And he is not her therapist, he is her enabler. You are well rid of him, Chloe. Well rid." Her bluntness was a cleansing fire, burning away the tangled weeds of doubt and guilt that Maya had so carefully cultivated. With Lena and my other roommate, Jess, by my side, the campus began to feel less like a minefield and more like a place of possibility. Meanwhile, the machinery of my escape whirred into motion. My mother, after her initial surprise, had thrown herself into the logistical fray with the ferocity of a general. Video calls with my aunt in Vancouver became a daily occurrence. My portfolio was submitted to OCD, my application fast-tracked. I began the laborious process of applying for a Canadian student visa, filling out endless forms and gathering financial statements and acceptance letters. Each bureaucratic hurdle cleared, each official stamp pressed into my passport, felt like another bolt sliding home, locking me into my new trajectory. I initiated the withdrawal process from my current university, a move that felt deliciously final. The world, I discovered, was full of kind, normal people who didn't speak in manipulative subtext. My professors were encouraging when I told them I was transferring to pursue my passion. The university administration was helpful and efficient. It was a revelation. A universe that operated on logic and respect, not on the shifting sands of emotional manipulation. Of course, the peace couldn't last. The storm, when it came, was triggered by something seemingly insignificant. A cup of brown sugar tea. It was the final day of military training. The 2-week ordeal was almost over and my body was screaming in protest. The cramps that had been threatening arrived with a vengeance, a familiar, cruel vice tightening in my lower abdomen. A dull, persistent headache had taken root behind my eyes. During a longer lunch break, I managed to place an order on my phone for a large, scalding hot brown sugar ginger tea from a traditional dessert shop a mile from campus. It was my only hope of surviving the afternoon's final drills. When the delivery notification chimed, a fresh, searing wave of pain doubled me over. I clutched my stomach, my vision spotting. "Leo," I gasped, my voice thin with strain. He was standing nearby, joking with a few guys from his squad. "My tea. It's at the east gate. Can you please go grab it for me? I need to run to the bathroom. I feel awful." He turned, his expression a familiar blend of annoyance and impatience. "Chloe, it's the last day. Can't you just wait? We have to be back on the field in 20 minutes. Please, Leo," I begged, the pain making me desperate. "I really need this. It's for the cramps." He sighed, the long-suffering sigh of a man burdened by a woman's inconvenient biology. "Fine. But hurry up." I didn't need telling twice. I practically ran to the restroom, leaning against the cool stall door as another cramp ripped through me. When I emerged, shaky and pale, I scanned the area for Leo. I saw him standing with Maya. And in her hand was my large takeaway cup, the one with my name, Thew, clearly scrawled on the side in black marker. The straw was between her lips, and the liquid level was visibly halfway down. A hot, acidic wave of betrayal washed over me, so potent it momentarily eclipsed the physical pain. I walked over, my legs feeling like rubber. "Leo," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "That's my tea." Maya jumped as if startled by my appearance. "Oh, Chloe. I'm so sorry," she chirped, her voice a symphony of false contrition. She didn't look sorry. She looked triumphant. "Leo just handed it to me when he came back. I assumed he'd bought it for me. You know how he's always taking care of me." She thrust the half-empty cup toward me. "Here, you can have the rest. Don't be mad. It's just tea." Leo frowned at me, his arms crossed. "Chloe, relax. Histy. I'll buy you another one later. Don't make a scene. It's not just tea." The words erupted from me, sharp and frayed. The dam of my composure broke. "I ordered this specifically for my cramps. You know what today is. You know how much pain I'm in." "Ooh, the cramps again," Maya said with a theatrical, sympathetic pout. He turned to Leo. "Poor thing. She really does have a weak constitution, doesn't she? It must be so hard for her. Leo, maybe you should just take her back to the dorm. We can manage the last drill without you." The "we" was the final deliberate twist of the knife. It was her and Leo, a unit, and I was the fragile, disruptive outsider who needed to be managed and sent away. I looked at Leo. I saw the boy I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd written me love letters and promised me the world. But his face was a closed door. He was standing firmly on Maya's side of the threshold. In that moment, I didn't see my boyfriend. I saw a stranger, a collaborator in my humiliation. The pain, the frustration, the sheer soul-deep exhaustion of the last 2 years. The constant invalidation, the walking on eggshells, the feeling of being an outsider in my own relationship, coalesced into a single diamond-sharp point of clarity. I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing the anger down, letting it cool and harden into something unshakable. The chaos inside me stilled. I looked at Leo, my gaze steady and direct. "Leo," I said, my voice unervingly calm, a flat plane in the midst of emotional turbulence. "Since we're clearly not right for each other, let's break up." The smirk that twisted his lips was instantaneous. It was the expression of someone who believed he held all the power, who couldn't conceive of a world where I would actually walk away. "Chloe," he said, a condescending laugh in his voice. "You're the one saying it. Don't expect me to beg." "I don't," I said, my tone as flat as my gaze. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his thumbs jabbing at the screen with aggressive precision. "Let's make it official then." I heard the soft, definitive whoosh of a message being sent, followed by the tapping and swiping of him blocking me. Then Instagram. Then the campus social app. He did it all right in front of me, a performative public severance. It was meant to be a punishment, a display of his control. "There," he announced, pocketing the phone as if he'd just accomplished a great deed. "Emily, let's go. I need some peace and quiet." He didn't even get my name right. He called me Emily, his mother's name. It was the ultimate dismissal, the final erasure. I was no longer an individual to him. I was just a role that had been vacated. He slung his arm around Maya's shoulders, a gesture that was now devoid of any cousinly innocence, and they walked away. She turned her head just enough to shoot me a single blazing look of pure, unadulterated triumph. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the phantom sweetness of the brown sugar tea I never got to drink clinging to the air. The physical pain in my abdomen was still a brutal reality, but it was secondary now to the strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It wasn't the sharp agony of heartbreak I'd always feared. It was the profound silence after a long, deafening noise. It was the emptiness of a room after the furniture has been moved out. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply turned and walked back to my dorm, my steps measured and deliberate. The world around me, the chatter of other students, the shouted orders of the drill instructors, seemed to be happening behind a pane of thick glass. Back in the sanctuary of my room, I methodically went through the motions of reclamation. I took a long, scalding shower, washing the sweat, grime, and the lingering psychic residue of the relationship down the drain. I changed into soft, clean pajamas. I felt raw but clean. Then, with hands that did not tremble, I picked up my phone and called my mother. "Mom," I said, my voice steady and clear, carrying a newfound authority that surprised even me. "I've decided. I want to study abroad in Vancouver. I've accepted Aunt Sarah's offer. Can you please help me with the paperwork?" There was a weighted pause on the other end of the line. She knew about Leo. She knew the entire complicated history. "Chloe, honey, are you sure? Is this because of what happened with Leo?" "It's because of me, Mom," I interrupted, my voice gentle but firm. "It's for me. I'm sure." As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a new notification. It was a text from an unknown number, but the phrasing was as familiar as my own reflection. "Hey, it's Maya. Leo is really upset, you know. He didn't mean for you to overreact like that. Breaking up is so drastic. Maybe if you apologize for causing a scene, he'll think about taking you back." Just some friendly advice from his favorite cousin's smiling face with smiling eyes. I didn't feel a surge of anger. I felt nothing. It was just noise. I tapped the number, selected block this caller, and confirmed. It was that simple. That easy. The unraveling was complete. The threads of a life I had outgrown lay at my feet. And for the first time in a very long time, I was the one who had chosen to cut them. I was no longer a character in their story. I was the author of my own. The silence that settled after the breakup was a living thing. A quiet companion that walked with me to classes, sat with me in the cafeteria, and filled the space in my dorm room. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a fertile one, allowing new thoughts to take root. The constant low-grade hum of anxiety that had been my soundtrack for years. The need to decipher Leo's moods, to brace for Maya's next verbal dart, to manage the delicate ecosystem of their enmeshed relationship, was gone. In its place was a profound calm. My roommates, Lena and Jess, became my unexpected sanctuary. They didn't pry for details, but their solidarity was a fortress around me. They dragged me to movie nights, forced me to try the spiciest noodles from the campus food truck, and filled my evenings with laughter and debates about everything from Kant to K-pop. "You realize," Jess said one evening, painting her toenails a violent shade of purple, "that by breaking up with him, you've essentially fired him from the job of being your problem. His performance review was shit. No severance package." Lena nodded sagely. "He was a bad employee. Always bringing his personal drama to work. And that cousin of his? She was the toxic coworker who keeps stealing your lunch from the fridge and then blaming the intern." Their analogies were absurd, but they worked. They reframed the entire painful saga into something manageable, even laughable. They were deprogramming me from a cult I hadn't even realized I'd joined. Meanwhile, my future was crystallizing with exhilarating speed. My acceptance from OCD arrived, a thick, creamy envelope that felt like a passport. My Canadian student visa was approved, its sticker a vibrant splash of color in my passport. I booked a one-way flight to Vancouver for October 10th. The administrative gears of my current university ground on, processing my withdrawal. Each completed form, each finalized step, was a brick laid in the foundation of my new life. I was no longer fleeing, I was building. I even allowed myself to sketch again. I bought a new leather-bound sketchbook and a set of expensive pencils. In the quiet of my room, with the late afternoon sun streaming through the window, I would lose myself in the sweep of lines and the smudge of shadows. I drew the ginkgo trees outside my window, their leaves just beginning to blush gold. I drew Lena, her fierce concentration as she studied. I drew abstract shapes that represented freedom. Birds taking flight, locks springing open, chains falling away. The act of creation felt like a homecoming. Of course, the piece was a threat to the old order. The first attempt to breach my new walls came in the library. I was tucked into a corral in the back of the stacks, hidden away in the sociology section where no one from my business classes would ever venture. I was deep in a sketch, trying to capture the way the light fell across the spines of the old books, when a shadow fell over my page. I looked up. Leo stood there. His eyes were shadowed, his usually immaculate hair was disheveled, and he wore a faded hoodie I didn't recognize. The sight of him sent a jolt through my system, but it wasn't the old pang of longing or anxiety. It was simple alarm, like seeing a spider where you least expect it. "We need to talk, Chloe." His voice was low, gravelly. I think everything that needed to be said was said on the training ground, I replied, closing my sketchbook with a deliberate snap. No. It wasn't. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down, his movements stiff. The small corral suddenly felt claustrophobic. This is insane. You're really going to throw away 3 years over a cup of tea? A misunderstanding. I began packing my pencils into their case. It wasn't about the tea, Leo. And it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. You just finally chose to see it. Then what? Maya. He said her name with a frustrated exhale, as if I were a child obsessed with a monster under the bed. She's my cousin, Chloe. My family. You're being jealous and paranoid. You're seeing ghosts. The old hooks, the words he and Maya had used for years to gaslight me into submission, snagged at the air around me. Jealous. Paranoid. For so long they had been the keys to my cage. But the lock was broken now. I'm not jealous, Leo. I'm disinterested. I stood up, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do. He shot to his feet and grabbed my wrist. His grip was firm, bordering on painful. What things? Moping? Complaining to your new friends about how mean I am? Plotting your little runaway fantasy? I wrenched my arm free, the contact making my skin crawl. Let go of me. Not until you listen to me. His voice rose, echoing in the quiet of the stacks. A few students glanced our way. I don't agree to this breakup, Chloe. I don't agree to you being like this. We're supposed to be together. Our parents, everyone expects it. This is what we planned. There was the script. The life that had been written for us by our families, by our shared history. A life where his comfort and his family's expectations were the non-negotiable plot points. And I was just a supporting character whose lines were already written. Well, I'm rewriting the script, I said, my voice cold and flat. I turned to leave, but he moved to block my path. Just then, as if summoned by the very intensity of his distress, Maya appeared at the end of the aisle. She hurried over, her face a perfect mask of concerned devotion. Leo, I've been looking everywhere for you. She placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of pure ownership. Then she turned her wide, faux-innocent eyes to me. Oh, Chloe, are you two still arguing about this? Look, I get it. Breaking up is hard. But you don't have to take it out on Leo. He's been so worried about you, he hasn't been sleeping. The performance was flawless. The caring cousin, the misunderstood, suffering boyfriend, the hysterical, vengeful ex-girlfriend. It was a play they had performed 100 times, and they knew their parts by heart. Leo looked from her back to me, his resolve visibly hardening, bolstered by her presence. See? This is what you're doing. You're causing drama. You're making Maya worry. When are you going to start acting like an adult? Something in me, the last fragile thread connecting me to that old life, snapped. The calm I had been clinging to evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp fury. I was done being the villain in their twisted two-person drama. I looked straight at Maya, my gaze unwavering. Maya, let me make this very clear for you, since you seem to have a chronic inability to understand plain English. My name is Chloe. Not poor Chloe. Not upset Chloe. Just Chloe. And the matters between me and Leo are none of your business. They never were. Her mouth fell open in a perfect shocked, oh. She was not used to direct confrontation. I had always been the one to back down, to swallow my words for the sake of peace. I turned my attention to Leo. And you don't get to agree or disagree with my decisions. We are broken up. It is not a negotiation. It is a fact. Stop touching me. Stop following me. And for God's sake, grow a spine and learn the difference between familial loyalty and emotional incest. The silence that followed was absolute, thick and heavy. The other students in the stacks were staring unabashedly. Leo's face was a thundercloud of humiliation and rage. Maya looked as if I had physically slapped her, her cheeks flushing a blotchy red. You bitch, Leo whispered, the word a venomous dart in the quiet. And in that moment, any lingering affection, any residual nostalgia for the boy he used to be, turned to cold, dead ash. He was a stranger. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. I simply turned and walked away, my head high, my steps firm and sure. I walked out of the sociology stacks, through the hushed quiet of the library, and into the bright, open atrium. I didn't look back. I left them standing there in the wreckage of their own narrative, exposed and ridiculous. The first blow had been thrown. Not by them but by me. And it wasn't a slap or a scream. It was the truth, spoken aloud in a calm, clear voice. It was the most powerful weapon I had. As I pushed open the heavy library doors and stepped out into the afternoon sun, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle wasn't over, I knew that. But I had just won the first and most important skirmish. I had reclaimed my voice. The confrontation in the library should have been the end of it. For me it was a line drawn in the sand, a door slammed shut. I had spoken my truth, and in doing so, I had exorcised the last of their power over me. But for Leo and Maya, my refusal to play my assigned role was an act of rebellion that demanded a response. Their campaign didn't end. It evolved, moving from the physical world to the digital, where Maya was a master weaver of narratives. The first strands of her new web were subtle. I started receiving messages from numbers I didn't know. He really misses you, you know. He's just too proud to say it. A friend. Saw Leo crying last night. Hope you're happy. You've broken a good man. The melodramatic tone was unmistakably Maya's. I didn't engage. I simply blocked each number, a quiet, digital pruning. It was like swatting away gnats. Then the social media offensive began. Maya's Instagram, once a sporadic collection of sunset photos and coffee cups, transformed into a shrine to her and Leo's bond. It was a flood of curated nostalgia. A black and white photo of them as toddlers, covered in sand with the caption, "Family is forever. My rock since the sandbox. #cousin goals." A picture from high school, his arms slung casually over her shoulder, both of them laughing, through every stupid phase and bad haircut. #myperson. A recent, slightly blurry selfie of them in the campus cafeteria. Home isn't a place, it's a person. So grateful for my cuz. The comments were a chorus of their mutual friends, most of whom I'd never really liked. You two are the cutest. Wish my cousin was this cool. Relationship goals, honestly. This is what real love looks like. It was a brilliant, insidious piece of propaganda. She was constructing a public narrative of an unbreakable, pure and enviable bond. In this story, my presence in Leo's life was a temporary, insignificant blip. I was the one who had dared to question this perfect union, and my exile was not a tragedy but a necessary cleansing. I was the villain, and she was the loyal heroine standing by her heartbroken cousin. Lena showed me one of the posts, her brow furrowed with disgust. This is psychological warfare, Chloe. So manipulative. She's trying to rewrite history. I know, I said, scrolling through the comments with a detached curiosity. But let her. She's just preaching to her own choir. They live in an echo chamber. I don't have to listen to the noise. It was strangely liberating to watch it from the outside. I was a spectator at a play I'd already walked out of. The drama, the passion, the perceived slights. It all seemed so small, so trivial from the vantage point of my new life. The final, desperate strand of her web was spun on a rainy Friday in the main campus cafeteria. The air was thick with the smell of wet raincoats and fried food. I was sitting with Lena and Jess, enjoying a plate of surprisingly decent lo mein and telling them about my latest visa approval, when I felt a presence loom over our table. Chloe. Maya's voice was saccharine, laced with a performative concern that set my teeth on edge. We need to talk. For Leo's sake. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I have nothing to say to you, Maya. But I have something to say to you. She pulled out a chair and sat, completely ignoring the hostile glares from Lena and Jess. This silent treatment has to stop. Leo is a mess. A complete mess. He's not eating, he's not sleeping. Your little power trip is destroying him. Jess put down her fork with a loud clatter. His mental health is his own responsibility. And yours. Maya's mask of concern slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the spite beneath. She focused her laser gaze back on me. You're heartless. After everything he's done for you? After everything I've done to include you? You were never good enough for him, you know. Everyone saw it. You're just the girl next door. I'm his blood. I'm his family. I know him in ways you never will. There was the core truth, the rotten foundation of their entire relationship, finally spoken aloud in a crowded cafeteria. If you know him so well, Lena interjected, her voice dripping with icy sarcasm, then why are you here bothering his ex-girlfriend? Shouldn't you be at home hand-feeding him soup and playing him sad songs on a violin? Maya ignored her, her eyes locked on me, waiting for me to break, to cry, to validate her performance. And that's when I saw him. Leo was standing at the entrance of the cafeteria, scanning the room. When his eyes landed on our table, his expression grim, he started walking toward us. This was her master plan. The grand finale. She had orchestrated this public confrontation, this accidental meeting, sure that I would either cause a scene, proving her point that I was unstable and dramatic, or better yet, break down and beg for him back, inflating her ego to celestial proportions. She had woven a web, and she was absolutely certain I was caught in the center of it. Leo reached the table. "Maya, what's going on?" he asked, though his tone suggested he was an actor arriving on cue for the final act. "I was just trying to talk some sense into Chloe," Maya said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "For you. She's being so stubborn." Leo looked at me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of his old self, confused, maybe even a little hopeful. "Chloe? Do you have something to say?" The entire section of the cafeteria seemed to be holding its breath. This was the moment Maya had written and directed. The moment of my humiliation or my surrender. I stood up slowly. The plastic legs of my chair scraped against the tiled floor, a sharp, decisive sound. I picked up my tray. I looked Leo dead in the eye. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and carrying, cutting through the ambient noise. "I do have something to say." I turned to Maya. "You are a sad, manipulative little girl who is in love with her own cousin. And you," I turned back to Leo, my voice cold and precise, "are a pathetic mommy's boy who is too weak to cut the apron strings, let alone the creepy, incestuous ones your cousin has tied around your neck. You deserve each other. Now get out of my way. You're blocking my path." The silence that followed was deafening. It was a vacuum sucking all the sound from the room. Maya's face was chalk white, her mouth agape. Leo looked like I had reached into his chest and ripped out his heart. The shock on their faces was almost comical. Then I did the one thing they never, ever expected. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I didn't wait for a response. I simply walked away. I maneuvered around Leo's frozen form, my tray held steady, and I walked out of the cafeteria. I didn't look back. I didn't speed up. I walked with a calm, measured pace, out the doors and into the drizzling rain. I left them standing there, exposed and utterly deflated in the middle of the crowded cafeteria. The web she had so carefully woven I had just set on fire. And as I walked away, the cool rain on my face feeling like a baptism, I knew it was ash. She had built it, but I had the power to burn it down. And I had. The victory was quiet, but it was absolute. The fallout from the cafeteria was swift and, for the first time, publicly in my favor. The story, embellished with each retelling, spread through the freshman class like a juicy virus. Maya's carefully constructed #cousin-goals persona was shattered, replaced with whispers of weird, obsessive, and get a therapist. Leo, the good man she tried to portray, was now widely seen as spineless and complicit. The court of public opinion, so often a fickle beast, had found new targets. I became a minor, quiet icon of resistance. Girls from my economics class I'd never spoken to would give me small, approving nods in the hallway. Lena and Jess treated me to a celebratory dinner, toasting with cheap soda to the death of toxic relationships and the rise of Queen Chloe. For the first time I felt truly, unshakably free. The weight of their judgment was gone because I had publicly and spectacularly rejected it. Their opinions were no longer my prison. My focus narrowed to a laser point on my future. My Canadian student visa arrived, a crisp, official page in my passport that felt more valuable than gold. My flight was booked for October 10th. The countdown had begun. One afternoon, while packing my dorm room into a series of cardboard boxes, I found a plastic tub buried at the back of my closet. It was a time capsule of my life with Leo. Ticket stubs from movies we'd seen, a dried corsage from prom, a stack of handwritten letters from when we were 16, and love felt like a world-altering discovery. I sat on the floor, cross-legged, and opened one at random. "Chloe, I saw you laughing with Sam today in chem class. It made me so jealous. I know it's stupid. I want to be the one who makes you laugh like that. Always. Yours, Leo." The words, once so precious they felt etched onto my soul, now felt like artifacts from a distant foreign civilization. The boy who wrote them was a ghost. I was about to toss the entire stack into the recycling bin when a thought, cold and sharp as an icicle, pierced through the haze of nostalgia. Her interference had always been insidious, but I'd always attributed her knowledge to Leo's confidences. A betrayal of intimacy, but a simple one. Now I wasn't so sure. She had always seemed to know things. Private jokes, minor arguments, even the date of my period. I'd chalked it up to Leo's oversharing, but the timing was often too perfect, her knowledge too specific. I remembered the week we submitted our college applications. We'd done them together at his house, our laptops side by side on the kitchen table, fueled by pizza and nervous excitement. We cheered when we hit submit on our applications to this very university, dreaming of our future together. I'd been ecstatic. I'd been accepted into my first choice program, graphic design. But a week later, I'd received a cryptic, impersonal email from the admissions department. It cited a clerical error and a program reassignment based on availability and overall applicant profile. I was devastated. My spot in graphic design was gone. I was now enrolled in business administration. I'd sobbed in Leo's arms and he'd held me, telling me it didn't matter, we'd still be together, that a business degree was more practical anyway. At the time I'd seen it as sweet, if misguided, comfort. Now the memory curdled in my stomach. Maya had been there that day. Hovering. Bringing us snacks. She'd leaned over my shoulder, her breath on my neck. "What's your login, Chloe? I just want to see what the application portal looks like. It's so different from mine." A cold dread, thick and heavy, settled in my gut. I grabbed my laptop from my desk, my hands trembling slightly. I navigated to the university's student portal login page and clicked Forgot Password. I typed in my student ID. The security question flashed onto the screen. "What is your mother's maiden name?" It was common knowledge. Leo knew it. Maya definitely knew it. I clicked the link sent to my email and logged into the portal, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I navigated through the menus, my breath held until I found application history. There was a digital ledger of my fate. Application submitted, November 15th. Program, Bachelor of Design, Graphic Design. Status accepted. And below it a single damning log entry. Application edited, November 20th. Program changed to Bachelor of Business Administration. Status accepted. November 20th. The day we had all worked on our applications at Leo's house. It wasn't a clerical error. It was sabotage. Cold, calculated, and devastatingly effective. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. I slumped back against my bed, the laptop almost sliding from my knees. The room spun. She hadn't just been content with stealing my boyfriend's attention. She had tried to steal my future. She had tried to mold me into a less creative, less threatening person. Someone whose ambitions wouldn't overshadow her own lack of direction. She wanted me docile, conventional, and permanently in her shadow. A clean, white-hot rage surged through me, burning away the last remnants of sentimental attachment. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to print out that log entry and tape it to her forehead. But then my eyes fell on the open cardboard box beside me. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was my new, pristine sketchbook and a set of professional-grade drawing pencils I'd bought for OC. Next to it lay my passport with its beautiful visa and the printout of my plane ticket. Vancouver. Graphic design. She had failed. A slow, grim smile spread across my face. I didn't need revenge. My escape, my success was the ultimate revenge. Her petty, vicious sabotage had only succeeded in pushing me faster and harder toward the path I was always meant to be on. The path she had tried to block. I closed the laptop with a definitive snap. The truth was mine to know, and that was enough. I gathered the old letters, the ticket stubs, the dried flowers, all the fragile relics of a past life. I didn't look at them again. I carried the box to the large trash bin down the hall and dropped it all in. The thud it made was the sound of a door closing forever. The past was a corpse. Let it bury itself. I had a plane to catch, a city to conquer, and a future she could never touch. The final days before my departure were a whirlwind of bittersweet goodbyes and exhilarating finality. I met with my professors who were surprisingly encouraging about my transfer. My counselor, a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes, simply nodded and said, "Sometimes the path we choose chooses us back." Go be brilliant, Chloe. I said a tearful farewell to Lena and Jess, promising daily video calls and swearing them to secrecy about my exact travel details. You're going to crush Canada, Lena said, crushing me in a tight hug. And find a boyfriend who doesn't have a creepy cousin obsession, Jess added, making us all laugh through our tears. My parents drove me to the Shanghai Pudong International Airport. The car ride was quiet, filled with a mix of sadness and unspoken pride. My mom held my hand the entire way. I'm so proud of you, Chloe, she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. For chasing your dream. For everything. She didn't mention Leo, but she didn't have to. She knew this was about more than a degree. It was a declaration of independence. The airport was a monument to transitions, a cathedral of goodbyes and hellos. The vast, echoing halls, the frantic energy of travelers, the robotic announcements in multiple languages, it all felt like the perfect setting for the final act of my old life. A thrill of nervous excitement buzzed under my skin as I wheeled my suitcase toward the check-in counter. This was it. The point of no return. And of course he was there. Chloe. The voice, sharp with desperation, cut through the airport din. I turned, my heart sinking. Leo was striding toward me, his face pale and strained, his hair a mess. He looked like he'd been pulled through a knothole backward. You were really going to leave without saying a proper goodbye? He demanded, his voice cracking, his eyes wild. We said goodbye on the training ground, Leo, I said, my voice calm as I continued walking toward the economy class line. It was more than enough. He moved quickly, grabbing my arm and spinning me around. The contact was jarring, invasive. Stop it. Just stop this. I don't agree to you going abroad. I don't agree. His voice rose, drawing stares from other travelers. His entitlement was breathtaking, a relic from a world I no longer inhabited. You don't have to agree, I said, trying to pry his fingers from my arm. This is my life. My decision. Your life is with me, he shouted, the sound echoing in the vast space. We had plans. Our families, our future. You can't just run away to another country because you're throwing a tantrum. Is this about that art school nonsense? His words were a weak, pathetic echo, losing all their power in the face of my resolve. Leo, listen to yourself, I said, my voice low and steady. You're standing in an international airport, telling your ex-girlfriend she's not allowed to board a plane. Do you hear how insane that sounds? His eyes were pleading, desperate. It's because of Maya, isn't it? Fine. Well, I'll tell her to back off. I'll stop talking to her. I'll do anything. Just please, Chloe. Don't go. I'll do anything. It was the offer I might have sold my soul for just a few months ago. Now it just sounded pathetic, a last-ditch effort from a man who had run out of tricks. It's too late, I said, and I meant it in every conceivable way. Just then a smooth, calm voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? I turned, a wave of relief washing over me. It was Alex, a friend of my cousin's who was also on his way to study in Vancouver. We'd been introduced a few weeks prior and had bonded over our shared anxieties about moving abroad. He was tall, with an easy confidence and a quiet strength that was the polar opposite of Leo's frantic energy. Alex, I said, my shoulders relaxing. No, it's fine. Leo's eyes narrowed, flicking between Alex and me with a toxic mix of jealousy and rage. Who the hell is this? He sneered. Is this why you're leaving? You're fickle. You moved on that fast. Alex stepped slightly in front of me, a protective but non-confrontational gesture. I'm a friend. And from what I've heard, Chloe moving on seems like a very healthy decision. Leo looked utterly deflated. The sight of me with someone else, someone calm, confident, and unquestionably on my side, shattered the last of his delusions. The fight drained out of him, leaving only a hollow, broken shell of the boy I'd once known. You were supposed to love me, he whispered, the words a broken plea barely audible over the airport noise. I did, I said, and it was the profound truth. But you loved making your cousin happy more than you loved me. You loved the drama. You loved being the center of our universe. I saw the truth of my words hit him like a physical blow. His shoulders slumped. He looked lost, small, and impossibly young amidst the bustling crowd. Goodbye, Leo, I said softly, finally prying his limp hand from my arm. I turned my back on him for the last time. Alex picked up my carry-on and we walked together toward the check-in counter, toward the security gates, toward the future. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I handed my passport to the agent, I felt the last chain tethering me to that old life snap. I was already gone. The airport wasn't an end. It was a magnificent, roaring beginning. Vancouver in the autumn was a revelation. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of salt from the ocean and the earthy perfume of damp pine and decaying leaves from Stanley Park. It was a world away from the humid, oppressive heat and the suffocating emotional atmosphere I had left behind. The city itself felt open, spacious, and full of a quiet, orderly promise. The mountains were a constant, majestic presence on the horizon, a reminder of a scale and grandeur that made my old problems seem microscopic. My aunt, a vibrant woman with silver-streaked hair and a painter's smock perpetually stained with color, welcomed me into her Kitsilano townhouse with a hug that felt like coming home. The house was a delightful chaos of art books, half-finished canvases, and the rich, dark smell of coffee. "Welcome home, Chloe," she said, and the word home settled deep in my bones, feeling truer than it ever had before. The first few weeks were a beautiful, terrifying blur. OCAD's campus was a stimulating assault on the senses, a modern architectural marvel filled with students who wore their creativity like a second skin. My program was everything I had dreamed of and twice as demanding. We were thrown into intensive projects from day one, our work critiqued in sessions that were brutally honest but never cruel. It was a language of creation I understood intuitively, a world where passion was currency and talent was the only pedigree that mattered. Alex and I became fast friends, our shared status as terrified newcomers forging a quick bond. We explored the city together on weekends, getting intentionally lost in the vibrant bohemian chaos of Commercial Drive, staring up in awe at the glass and steel canopy of the library downtown, and huddling in cozy coffee shops in Gastown to complain about our impossible workloads and sketch the other patrons. He was studying architecture and we discovered a shared visual language, often spending hours in comfortable silence, our pencils scratching in unison, building worlds on paper. One evening we were in his dorm's common room, spread out on a large table with our sketches and models for a cross-disciplinary project. The rain was pattering softly against the large windows, casting everything in a soft, gray light. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Lena back home. "You're not going to believe this." She attached a series of screenshots. They were of long, rambling, increasingly unhinged posts from Maya. The tone was a complete departure from her previous, gloating #cousin goals updates. This was a torrent of rage and self-pity. Phrases like betrayed by blood, a new son to replace the old, and stolen inheritance were littered throughout the text. My curiosity piqued. I called Lena. "Hey, Spill. What's happening?" "The tea is piping hot, Chloe," Lena said, her voice buzzing with gossipy glee. So apparently Leo's dad's business hit a massive rough patch. Some big deal fell through, cash flow dried up. In a panic he went to see some fortune teller? A master. And this guy told him his string of bad luck was because of an unclean influence in the family, someone who brought miasma with them. A cold dread trickled down my spine. He blamed Maya. Bingo. He apparently went full scorched earth. He had some lawyer draw up papers disinheriting Leo, kicked him out of the house and cut him off completely. And get this, the rumor is he's been having a long-term affair. He has a whole other woman and a young daughter, and he's just moved them into the family home. He even has a new 3-year-old son. Leo's been completely replaced. Erased. I was speechless, the phone pressed tight to my ear. The drama I had left behind had not fizzled out. It had exploded into a full-blown Shakespearean tragedy of betrayal, superstition, and familial collapse. And Leo? I finally managed to ask, my voice quiet. No one knows. He dropped out of school. He's just vanished. And Maya's posts are getting weirder and weirder. She's blaming you, of course. Saying you poisoned everyone's minds against them from across the ocean. I ended the call, feeling a strange, hollow mix of pity and a grim, unsettling sense of satisfaction. They had been so utterly consumed by their toxic, codependent little world that they had failed to see the larger one collapsing around them. Leo's father, seeking a scapegoat for his own failures, had found the most vulnerable target, the orphaned cousin. The very person he had taken in out of duty had now been cast as the source of all his misfortune. Bad news from home? Alex asked, looking up from his intricate architectural model. I told him everything. The whole sordid story, from the brown sugar tea to the library confrontation, the cafeteria showdown, the application sabotage, and now this bizarre Gothic finale. It was the first time I had laid the entire saga out from beginning to end, and speaking it aloud to someone who had no connection to that world felt like a final cathartic exorcism. Alex listened quietly, his expression thoughtful, never interrupting. When I finished, he shook his head slowly. "They were a poison for each other," he said, his voice soft but certain. "A closed system with no outlet. Sounds like that poison finally consumed them. You didn't just escape, Chloe. You were rescued." His words settled something deep within me. He was right. This wasn't just a change of scenery. It was a salvation. A narrow escape from a sinking ship whose passengers had been too busy fighting amongst themselves to notice the water pouring in. Later that night, as I walked back to my aunt's house through the quiet, rain-slicked streets, the towering evergreens standing as silent sentinels, I thought about Leo and Maya. Their story was one of possession, manipulation, and ultimately self-destruction. Mine was becoming one of creation, discovery, and quiet resilience. I unlocked the door to the warm, brightly lit townhouse. The smell of my aunt's lentil soup greeted me, a simple, wholesome aroma that spoke of stability and care. On the kitchen table was a new set of high-quality Japanese brush pens she had bought me as a surprise. I picked one up, feeling its perfect weight in my hand. I was in a new world. A world of my own making. And for the first time in my life, with every fiber of my being, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The past was a ghost, and its echoes were finally fading into nothing. Winter descended on Vancouver with a quiet, profound grace. The city transformed into a monochrome dreamscape, the evergreens bowing under the weight of fresh snow, the mountains stark and majestic against a pale gray sky. My life had settled into a rhythm that was both challenging and deeply fulfilling. My days were a blur of studio time, lectures on color theory and design principles, and late-night conversations with Alex about form, function, and our futures. The ghost of my old life had receded, becoming a distant, half-remembered story that belonged to someone else. Then the final chilling echo arrived. It was a message from Lena, a link to a news article from our hometown. The headline was stark and brutal, the digital typeface screaming a horror I could never have imagined. "Disappearance ends in tragedy. Male student in custody after cousin's death." My heart stuttered to a stop. I clicked the link with numb, trembling fingers, the world narrowing to the glowing screen of my laptop. The article was sparse on graphic detail, but the horror was etched between the lines. Leo and Maya had vanished from their known addresses weeks ago. Maya's body had been found in a derelict industrial unit on the city's outskirts. The police source, speaking anonymously, described prolonged, extreme torture, and injuries consistent with systematic ritualistic abuse. The coroner's report stated there was no single fatal wound. She had succumbed to a combination of trauma, exposure, and slow, agonizing organ failure. Leo had been arrested at the scene, covered in her blood, reportedly incoherent, mumbling about filth and cleansing and unclean spirits. A subsequent psychiatric evaluation found him to be suffering from a severe drug-induced psychosis, compounded by pre-existing paranoid delusions. He was declared unfit to stand trial and committed indefinitely to a high-security forensic psychiatric facility. I pushed back from my desk, my hand flying to my mouth, the room tilting on its axis. The images flooded my mind, unbidden and grotesque. The boy I'd shared my first kiss with, whose laughter had once been my favorite sound. The girl who had clung to him with a possessive, all-consuming fire. Their story, which I had thought was a drama of petty jealousies and emotional manipulation, had curdled into this unspeakable Gothic nightmare. The master's superstitious ramblings, his father's cruel and final rejection, the pressure, the isolation, the toxic fuel of their codependency, it had all fused together in the crucible of Leo's broken mind. He hadn't just blamed Maya. He had literally demonized her. In his psychosis, she was no longer a person but the literal embodiment of the miasma that had ruined his life, a source of evil that had to be violently, meticulously purged. And she, in her own twisted, desperate devotion, had likely followed him, unable to break the bond even as it became her death sentence. I felt no victory, no satisfaction, only a profound, soul-deep sadness that seemed to leach the warmth from the room, and a chilling, visceral understanding of my own narrow escape. If I had continued to be the buffer, the acceptable target for their dysfunction, would his fractured mind have eventually turned on me? The thought was a cold hand around my throat. Alex came over as soon as I called him, his face etched with concern. He didn't offer platitudes or try to make sense of the senseless. He just held me while I cried, not for Leo, not for Maya, but for the terrible, wasteful tragedy of it all. For the loss of the people they might have been, for the devastating power of untreated pain and the monsters it can create. They were a closed system, Alex said softly, long after my tears had dried into a hollow ache. No fresh air, no new perspectives. Just the two of them, feeding on each other's poison until it destroyed them from the inside out. You leaving was the one healthy, life-saving act in that entire situation. Weeks turned into months. The sharp horror of the news story slowly receded, becoming a dark, accepted part of my history. A chapter one had thankfully closed long before its terrible final page was written. One bright, crystalline afternoon in early spring, I was in the OCD studio, putting the finishing touches on my final project for the semester. It was a digital triptych titled Severance. The first panel was dark, claustrophobic, filled with tangled, thorny vines that vaguely suggested two figures merging into one. The second panel was a single, clean, decisive slice of a scalpel, cutting through the vines, the cut glowing with pure white light. The third panel was a burst of liberated color and abstract, soaring shapes against a vast open sky. It was my story. Not of bitterness or revenge, but of liberation. Of the courage it takes to cut away the rotten parts of your life, no matter how deeply they are entwined. Alex appeared in the doorway, a small, nervous smile playing on his lips. Hey, it looks amazing, Chloe. Powerful. Thanks, I said, smiling back, a genuine feeling of peace settling over me. I think it's finally done. He walked over, studying the panels for a long time, his gaze thoughtful. I was wondering, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Now that we're not just two terrified newcomers anymore, now that we've both settled into our own skins here, would you maybe want to go on a proper date with me? No talk of visas or coursework. Just us. I looked at him, at his kind, steady eyes, his quiet strength, the way he had built me up with his unwavering belief in me. I thought of the chaos and darkness I had left behind, and the quiet, creative, purposeful life I was building here, brick by brick. I reached out and took his hand, his grip warm and solid. I'd love that, I said, and I meant it with every part of my healed and hopeful heart. As we left the studio together, the setting sun painted the Vancouver skyline in shades of rose and gold. The echoes of the past were finally, completely silent. They had faded not with a bang but with the quiet, steady rhythm of a life well lived. My ending wasn't a dramatic explosion in a distant warehouse. It was a quiet, sun-drenched beginning in a city I now called home, with a hand to hold that felt not like a chain but like a promise. The end.